Gators Breakdown episode 88 is ready to go with our initial reaction to Florida getting defeated by Michigan 33-17 out in Dallas. Outmanned, outcoached. That's what happened in Dallas. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SCC. And joining me for this initial reaction is Joe Vizzy. Joe, where can they find you on Twitter, man?
At JoV_GatorsPod.
Yep. Joe, man, we'll dive into it. Remember, guys, you can find all your other Gator Breakdown episodes, SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. But this is kind of just a quick little initial analysis of what we saw when Florida traveled to Dallas. It was ugly. A little bit of hope at the beginning, a little bit of hope after a couple turnovers. But the quick stats here before Joey analyzed kind of what we saw. As I mentioned, 33-17 total yards for Michigan, 433. 192 for Florida, 19 first downs for Michigan, 9 for Florida. Third down, 6 of 18 for Michigan, 2 of 13 for Florida. Florida with 181 yards passing of 14 of 26 between Franks and Zaire. 218 passing for Michigan, 12 of 26 there. Florida, here's this big time stat, and I was worried about this one. 11 yards rushing for Florida, 215 for Michigan. Florida 0.4 yards per rush. Michigan with 4.4. Florida, hey, only 5 penalties. There's a silver lining, Joe. 7 for Michigan. Florida with 3 turnovers. Michigan with 2 pick sixes. That was just a quick roundabout. We'll go into some player stats here in a second. But Joe, looking at those stats, and man, I still think we're a little surprised by how the offense came out and looked after months to prepare. But maybe we shouldn't have been.
David, what's really alarming is 3 out of Florida's last 6 games, they have not scored an offensive touchdown. Think about that. 3 out of the last 6 games that the Florida Gators have played, 0 offensive touchdowns. Florida State, Arkansas, and Michigan. I mean, that's unacceptable. I don't care if you're the University of Florida or you're, University of North Florida. It's just unacceptable not to score a single offensive touchdown in any game, let alone 3 out of your last 6. I tweeted earlier, and it got a lot of attention that pulling Franks for a series was a smart move. I think he needed to collect his thoughts, especially after a couple trips and a couple mistakes, but to pull him for pretty much almost the entire second half was the biggest mistake that McElwain made all day yesterday. You can throw the play calling out there or, the lack of O-line blocking and all this stuff, but I think the biggest mistake yesterday was pulling Felipe Franks, because not only did Zaire come in and look absolutely atrocious at times, he completely screwed with the offense. They tried to change up the offense a little bit, and McElwain even admitted to it, that he tried to change the pace up. He tried to change the batting order, he said. But not only did it ruin, I think, the game for Florida, I think that was a huge way to ruin the game. I think that you messed with Frank's confidence a little bit. They panned to him on the sideline several times. He was throwing the ball, thinking that he was going to go back in. And we thought he was going to go back in, and he never went back in. That alone would upset anybody. So I really think that Jim McElwain needs to name Felipe Franks the starter tomorrow for this game against Northern Colorado, because this is a game where Franks could honestly go out and throw a bunch of touchdowns. So on Saturday. So I think it could be the game to get his confidence back up. But I honestly think that pulling him was a huge misstep. And the defense had some rough patches yesterday, David. But you know what? Those 2 fumbles that Florida had that cost only two field goals. So the defense actually made some stops yesterday, and they did enough. As we're a broken record, David. The defense did enough to win yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say about that. It's just same song, same dance. The old saying goes, what is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So does that mean Jim McElwain's insane? Because as of right now, I just don't know what to make out of yesterday, because did the suspensions come into play a little bit much, David? Maybe we overhyped the offensive line all summer? Maybe a little bit of both. Maybe, I also tweeted that it was a perfect storm for Florida yesterday to lose because you started a brand new quarterback that's never taken a snap in competition before in college football. And it was against a defense that's probably going to be top three in the country this year.
Yeah, and Joe, I mean, it really looked like, and I started outmanned, outcoached, but in every facet of the game, Michigan was better. And they've been there 3 years as a staff as well, and they had to replace guys, and they knew what they wanted to do, and they did it. And it looked like Florida knew what they wanted to do. But there was doubt. When we were previewing the game last week, and I said time and time again, I just don't think you can run into this defensive line in the first play of the game. We see a little handoff to Tyree Cleveland to the outside there. And I said, okay, maybe that's what we'll see more of. But that was about it. There was not a lot of creativity, and I think the struggles really do go on both sides. I think Nussmeier can absolutely be blamed, and I think he also has a right to sit here and look at an offensive line that really limits what he can do. But I still think we've seen that time and time again. I think in year 3, that's kind of a hard excuse now. I still think with the offensive line, you have to scheme around what you think your deficiency might be. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe McElwain really, really believed in this offensive line. And I just don't know what they saw in camp to know that it was going to be a jump where they could block this Michigan defensive line. I said it time and time again, that was my biggest worry of the game, and it turned out to be true. They dictated the game. Florida's offense did nothing to dictate the game. They didn't, miss directions to fight aggressiveness. A lot of screen, a few wide receiver screens there, but it's just they really couldn't do anything. That's all what it boils down to. There was blame to go around everywhere. Like you and I were talking before we come on here, it's hard to look at this with months to prepare for this game, and that was the game plan. And you mentioned that is Insanity's doing the same thing over and over again. And look, it looked exactly the same as what we saw last year. There was not much difference. Felipe Franks 5 of 9 for 75 yards, 8.3 yard average there. He didn't play terrible by any means. He played like a guy playing in his first game. He took care of the ball except for the fumble. You mentioned the trips there. Some of it was on his own players. Another it just happened. I don't think nothing was really on Franks. Would I've liked to see him play better, of course. But he didn't disappoint me by any means. I just thought he did what kind of he was stuck doing because of everything around him. So yes, it was tough. The fans were there in Dallas and they were ready. You could follow social media Friday and Saturday and see how, there were Gator fans everywhere. No lack of support there or anything. But, I did mention where the focus was of this team. I don't know how much that had to do with it. You mentioned the 10 suspensions there, and on the field, I don't think it really would have made that much of a difference. But was the focus there from the coaches? Was the focus there from the players? There's no way to measure that. We're not really going to know that. But it is something that could stick in the back of your mind that may have been, in effect on the game. We just won't know. But it's just the same song and dance, Joe, that we've seen, and it just didn't work.
David, that move yesterday reminded me of somebody that was panicked and desperate. That move to pull Franks after that fumble. I agree with everything you said. Felipe Franks did nothing, in my opinion, to be able to be benched. It was his first game. Give the kid a break. He had some passes, man, that were freaking awesome. And personally, I think Franks is a kind of guy, if he starts his career like that, I want to see what he looks like in game 8, game 9, game 10. Because if he starts his career like that with some of those throws he was making, I think he's only going to get better this year. So I swear, I mean, if Jim McElwain announces that somebody else is starting against Northern Colorado besides Felipe Franks, frankly, I'm probably not going to watch the game on Saturday because it's just embarrassing. It really is. Like I said, it was a panic move. It was a desperation move. I think McElwain was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Don Brown's, got our number and we need to just throw something else out there, and it almost seemed like he was throwing whatever he could at the wall just in letting something stick. Trying to get something to stick. And that to me is just not good coaching. And I don't want to throw blame to McElwain or Nussmeier or any of the coaching staff because I think the players on offense played pretty much hot garbage. Tony missed a few huge blocks that caused, guys to get in there basically untouched. Some offensive linemen, Brett Heggie missed a huge block that blew up a run. So, I mean, it is execution. And I know yesterday we had talked during the game, and I said that I disagreed about the play calling. The play calling was pretty bad, but I think that was only 50% of the problem yesterday. And that's, I wanted to point that out as well. I think that the move to pull Franks was terrible. I think it was ill-timed. I think it was panicked and desperate, and that's on McElwain. And I think that, and I'm really getting sick of the golly gee shucks, we'll get it fixed, attitude that he always has after the game, and he'll sit there and say, oh, we got whooped and we got our tails beat in, and we got out physicaled, and he'll sit there and tell you everything that went wrong, but yet he won't do anything to fix it. Next week, it'll come out against Northern Colorado and run the same plays and do the same stuff over and over again. So at one point, does a beat writer or somebody in there in the press room have the guts and the balls to frankly ask him, what are you doing? Well, what is your plan? Because at times McElwain comes off as kind of a jerk, and he thinks he's above it. You do have to answer to the fan base. The fan base is what pays your salary. You work at a public university. That your salary is paid by state taxes and by the fan base. So he does have to answer for his job. He's at a public job. It's a public job. So I really hope that tomorrow during his press conference, I'm going to be really interested to watch it and listen to it and see what his response is. I really hope somebody goes in there and asks him the tough questions about what are you going to do with play calling. I agree with you on this, David, about play calling. Try something different. Yeah. I hope McElwain takes over the play calling this week. I'd like to see it. I'd like to say, you know what? Nussmeier's going to handle the quarterbacks right now, and I'm going to handle play calling duties from this point on. I would really like to see something like that take place, because if McElwain, Derek Tyson pointed out that McElwain made his career on play calling, and I would like to see him take over play calling, David, and see if anything changes, because if it does, maybe we found something there.
Yeah, you're right. And I'll go to a couple of tweets I've seen out yesterday. This is a kind of initial reaction show, so I'll kind of share my initial reaction from yesterday. After the game, it was McElwain said there was some stuff that we didn't get to when he was talking about Kadarius Toney, Dre Massey, and players that we thought would be involved more in this offense, and they weren't. Massey, for all the talk, didn't catch his first pass until 4 minutes left in the game. Kadarius Toney was barely involved in anything, and there was some stuff we didn't get to. Really, I mean, that was my point last week. Pretty much a quote was, "Don't let Michigan dictate what you do. You dictate what you do." And that they played right into Michigan's hands. Michigan wanted Florida to try and go and outman them up front, and you know what? It played right into it. And the other thing I sent out there, the problem is it's a vicious cycle that shouldn't be the case in year 3. The players and or the coaches should be far enough along in year 3 where what we saw yesterday should not happen. This is the University of Florida. That was the University of Michigan. 2 powerhouse programs. Yes, I expected Michigan's defense to be good, but at Florida in year 3, under a coach who should have his players there and who we think these wide receivers are experienced, and this offensive line should be taking the next step, you should be taking the same steps Jim McElwain or Jim Harbaugh in Michigan's taken since he's been there, and it's regressed. It stayed the same or regressed. It hasn't gotten any better. So it's and McElwain said it, outmanned. Okay, that means you've been out recruited, and we've hit on that plenty of times, and that may be turning around now. But that's another thing that showed up is they've recruited better, and it really showed. And Will Miles threw out a great stat. We talk about these elite teams Florida plays, and so far have played FSU twice, or Jim McElwain has, Alabama twice, and now Michigan twice. So 0-6 versus those teams. 70 total points for Florida, 35 of those scored by special teams or defense in 6 games.
I do want to say something, David, and I owe you an apology, and I owe everybody else an apology that I said that Michigan was an overhyped and overrated team this summer, just because I thought that ESPN was loving on them so much that they were going to come out and fall flat on their face. I want to apologize. I think Michigan's going to win the Big Ten this year. I think Michigan has the best defense in the country, and I don't even think it's close. Their defensive line is disgusting.
Yeah.
And Don Brown is the best defensive coordinator in the country. And I do want to say that to all our viewers out there that this will probably be the best defense that Florida will face all year. So if there's a silver lining in any of this, as far as the offense goes, like I said earlier, it's the perfect storm to have a disaster on offense because of how good Michigan's defense is, and you're starting so many new guys. I do think that this is the best defense Florida will face all year. So maybe that they got the garbage out of the way right now. Like I said, you got Northern Colorado next week. You can kind of take advantage of that and get some confidence growing. Tennessee just announced that Kirkland's out for the rest of the year. That helps Florida as well when Florida plays Tennessee in 2 weeks. But then you got Kentucky, David, and I when we gave our predictions last week, people were getting on me about that Kentucky game, but I had a couple people tweet at me last night and say that might not be as garbage as originally thought. So I'm just saying, I think you got a couple weeks to kind of get things fixed. But if there is a silver lining, Michigan's a heck of a football team, David, and I just really think that Michigan, the way Ohio State looked in that first half against Indiana. I really could see Michigan winning the Big Ten this year. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And also, David, I want to say something else. If this offense does not get any better this year, who's going to be on campus in January, David?
Yeah.
Our buddy Matt Corral. He's coming as a freshman.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, you're going to have a lot of people, if this season does not go very well, especially on offense, with any of the quarterbacks, clamoring for that kid to start in the fall. I'm telling you. It's coming.
No, I do agree with you. I mean, the only other defense that's out there that might be on par with Michigan by the time things roll around is FSU late in the season. Georgia's talented as well. But after what I saw yesterday and after what I kind of, when we were kind of starting a lot of our season previews and looking at Michigan, and I was just like, man, I was like, yeah, I know they lost some experience, but if Don Brown does what he did, and he did, and with those young guys, they got enough playing time. And look, they weren't going to get worn out because my worry was Florida not being able to run into that defensive line, and Florida played right into it. So there were no sustained drives. And one big thing is, I know we wanted Felipe Franks because he had the big play potential, but where were the short passes? Where were the 3-step drop slants? And, where the tight ends were invisible until late in the game. It was a culmination of everything. There was not everything was used. We mentioned the lack of use of Tony and Massey, and Malik Davis had 1 carry for 8 yards. Never saw him again. It was just they felt this whole offensive staff just fell on themselves. Joey, I agree with you with the whole Franks thing, and they panicked. But I think they just really panicked, honestly, just throughout the whole game with play calling. It got on my nerves with no 3-step drops. Get the ball out of Felipe Franks' hands where that pass rush couldn't get to him. It was me going back to do what you want to do. Don't let them dictate that. I mean, they could dictate to a point, yes, because you may need 3-step drops to get the ball out. And, and another thing, I expected to see Malik Zaire more as a change of pace guy, like in the first quarter. I didn't expect the way he was thrown in to be the way he was thrown in. I thought there would be some planned, maybe third drive of the game or whatever, or getting a short yardage situation. That was probably the problem. Florida was rarely in a third and short anyway, so that's probably if that was the plan, that definitely got thrown away. But it was just, I guess part of the problem would be my expectations going in.
Let me point something out real quick, David. Most teams get better in the second half because of adjustments. Doesn't it seem to you like Florida gets worse in the second half and has no adjustments whatsoever? Florida has a history of starting off hot on offense, especially in the first quarter, second quarter. And then for some reason, they lose their lunch at halftime and turn into a completely different team. And that baffles me because the best coaches in the country, David, are the ones that make halftime adjustments to make their teams better in the second half. because that's when you need to be your best, is in the third and the fourth quarter. And that's something that Florida's been missing for many years. And we can go back to the Will Muschamp era and say the same thing about them too, about, the halftime adjustments with Kurt Roper and Brent Peace, because they weren't there either. So I just don't get it. I don't understand. I just don't get it, man. That's something that just blows my mind. Like you said about Malik Zaire, we thought he was going to be sprinkled in with packages. We didn't think that he was going to be, come in and be handed the keys to the car, and let it go off the road.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe. It was frustrating. It definitely was. It was just, as I guess the biggest problem was, it was just more of the same.
The moment was too big for the coaching staff. They look like the moment was too big.
You can't disagree with that. I mean, there's a lot of things.
They panicked. The play calling was panicked. The benching of Felipe Franks was panicked. Everything they did yesterday seemed reeked of panic and desperation, and I think the moment was just too big. I think the staff was overwhelmed by the stakes. Instead of just playing the game like you normally would, it was almost like their jobs were on the line if they didn't get this win or something. It just seemed like that. Like they were basically trying to lay it all on the table, just like I said, throwing it against the wall and seeing if it sticks.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just my main frustration is just not seeing anything different. It was just months to prepare. It looked the same. And ESPN just threw out a nice little, well, not a nice stat, but, for a stat that David Hale here, since Tebow left, Florida has failed to reach 250 yards of total offense 22 times, the second most among all Power 5 teams in that stretch. The 7 other teams with 15 or more aren't exactly recruiting on the same level as Florida, and they showed the teams, and it's not even close. Wake Forest, Kentucky, Kansas, Vandy, Maryland, Illinois. So,
and all those teams are outside the top 40 in recruiting.
Yeah,
and Florida's average recruiting was 9.4 on that list.
Yep. So, and as good as compared to those teams, recruiting is, they did fall behind the elites in FSU, Bama, Michigan, and that's been just a story of those games. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens from here, Joe. We'll hit this probably tomorrow night when we do this other this other thing. But where does Florida go from here? I think we can save that for tomorrow. So
yeah, we'll save that for tomorrow.
Yeah, something we can think of. Will it happen again? Can Florida get better? Where do they go from here? What can they work on? We're not coaches. Look, we're observers. That's what it comes down to. It is what it is at this point. We can observe from far away. They know more about football than we'll ever forget, or they'll forget more football than we ever know. But from as an observer, we can throw our opinions out there and what needs to happen. So, we'll see where they go from here. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Bill should join us as well. But Joe, just one last thought before we get off here.
Yeah, we'll react to the McElwain's presser tomorrow too.
It may be Tuesday.
Is it Tuesday?
With Labor Day. I know in the past it has been. I think.
Okay, then it probably is Tuesday then.
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Well, we'll find out. If it is tomorrow, then we'll react to it. If it's not, then obviously we'll discuss other things. But I'm just really interested that in McElwain's press conference post game yesterday, he said, "Oh, we'll reevaluate the quarterback situation and really look into it and whatnot." I'm paraphrasing here, but there's nothing really to reevaluate. You start Felipe Franks and you ride or die with the kid for the rest of the season. I'm sorry, everybody with 2 eyes and 2 ears and a brain between their ears actually saw that and said that on Twitter yesterday. So I just don't understand that comment, and I think, and what scares me, David, is McElwain's going to panic again, and he's gonna go to Luke Del Rio.
Yeah,
it does, because he's going to go think that it's the safe play for the season, and I think that's the wrong move.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I really get your reaction on this. I mean, and I'll go back. We'll talk defense a little bit. The young guys did make some plays. We saw the 2 pick sixes, of course, Henderson and Duke Dawson, and some good things there. You did mention a little earlier that they gave up they did what they're supposed to after Michigan fumbled or the fumbles, and they held Michigan to field goals. Looking at some other things there, yeah, there were times they got pushed around early in the game. Definitely, for sure, they did. Of course, the big plays happened, and look, I think we, in a way, with the inexperience in the secondary. I mean, look, Nate Washington went down. They hit the touchdown play after that. Florida had freshmen all over the field on that. I think we expected some things like that to happen early in the season. This was going to be something where they needed to get by in this game with some offensive help and build as a team. It was still much more of the same. The defense came up with big plays. They kept the team in it. But as we've seen in these other big-time games, it's eventually wear out and can't stay on the field, can't tackle because they're on the field so much. But I will speak to the point you made earlier. The defense did well enough. I think they kept Florida in the game. They were the only point scored beside a field goal but on the first drive. They did well enough to need some help from the offense and still put Florida in position to win this game.
Yeah, the defense, once again, did enough to win. And I do want to say this, David, and this should give a lot of people some nightmares at night. The defense isn't going to be able to save this team this year. I think the defense is good enough, like we just said, to do enough to win, but I don't think it's going to be able to win games for Florida this year. And I think that should make people nervous, because if the offense putters and putters and putters all season, this could be a dumpster fire season for this team. But if you want to look ahead till next year and the year after, I think this defense is going to be absolutely lethal in the next year or two. Those defensive backs, man, are nasty. We got McElwain really recruited some dogs, in the defensive backfield. I really like Sean Davis. I thought he played it pretty decent. I know he got burned on that coverage, but I think that was more miscommunication. But CJ Henderson is ridiculously good. Marco Wilson had some nice plays yesterday. So I think the bright spot for this defense, the defensive line got in there, man. Jordan Sherritt had a pretty good game yesterday. He was in Wilton Spate's face for half that game yesterday.
It was feast or famine sometimes.
It was. But the defensive line looked pretty good. CeCe Jefferson had a couple nice plays yesterday, and he should have had an interception. That ball he dropped, it got tipped to him. It landed almost in his hands. But the defense is going to play defense. We know that they're not going to be obviously as good as they've been the last couple of years, but they're going to be good enough. And Florida's offense is going to have to compensate for the lack of defense that's going to take place this year. So it's going to be, in my opinion, David, this could be a really, really good season, really special after this game, or this season is going to go down in flames.
Yeah. I mean, and one last thought on the defense, I think, and kind of what you're saying, they'll keep Florida in games this year. They may not win the games like they did in the past. Yeah. So I can agree with that, and we'll see how they go and how they move forward. We'll have another episode tomorrow night, like I said, of Gators Breakdown. Joe and Bill will join us, will join me, and we'll throw another episode out. This was, like I said, a kind of initial reaction just to get it out there. We'll have, more research done in the next day or so, and more film, all that kind of stuff that we can watch and see where Florida struggled just a bit more, get Bill's reactions as well. So, it's not so doom and gloom yet, guys. It does hurt. It's the day after the game, we know, but we'll see how Florida rebounds, and we'll go from there, Joe.
Yeah, man, and we'll also talk about when we can expect the guys from suspension to get back. So that's something that we just don't know, and maybe we'll find out a little bit more this week.
And one more thing, Chauncey Gardner was seen on crutches and in a boot after the game. So,
yes. But hopefully it's just a sprain.
Precautionary.
Hopefully it's just a sprain, and he can sit out against Northern Colorado and be back for Tennessee. So
hopefully so. So that's that's a storyline to watch out for too. Yep. But we'll be back next Gators Breakdown. So for Joe, I'm Dave, and we'll see you guys later on. Thanks for listening to Gators Breakdown.
Thanks, guys.